his strange, long-winded comedy routines into animated cartoons. How to tell the story of somebody who's never done anything except be weird. Maybe we can start at the beginning. His beginning.
I'm from New Jersey! Yahoo! I was born in Montclair, New Jersey! On Halloween, 1963! And 23 days later, John F. Kennedy was shot to death! Woo!
I think there's something special about what children do when children are just born. They may indicate their interests, their abilities. And as it happened, when I was just a little infant, I was in a movie theater with my mom and dad, and there were lots of other people, and we were all watching a film called The Train. And ultimately, these trains begin to smash into one another, and there's a series of train wrecks. And there I was, this infant, watching this take place, and it became really obvious to me that the trains were going to continue smashing into each other. So as they did, I kept saying, uh-oh, choo-choo train, uh-oh, choo-choo train. And it was just loud enough that some people heard it and laughed, and then more people heard it and laughed. And then ultimately, my dad was carrying me out of the theater as the trains were crashing into each other, and I was saying, while I was in his arms, uh-oh, choo-choo train, and the audience was laughing with greater and greater laughter. When I was very young, maybe about 8 years old, I was in Cub Scouts, and I had a lot of frustration doing other things, but when it came time to present a puppet show, I had this colossal success. I made a very simple puppet, and I hid kind of behind a puppet stand, and the puppet I held over my head so that the audience could see it. Well, after the show, I kind of introduced myself to the audience. I stepped out from behind the puppet stage, and people applauded and cheered. They seemed to enjoy my narration.
My sister has a Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon action Barbie playset.
Well, you gotta remember, we moved around a lot. Every 2 years, like a new bunch of friends. We never stuck around long enough. He's my older brother, and I'm his younger sister, and there was a time where people would meet him and say, oh, he's your younger brother, right? No. I remember summer camps. We'd go to theater camps together, and they were really kind of free form. Improvisation. I think that was a form of acceptance that everybody likes that,
When I was little, I didn't have a kitty cat or a little puppy, and we didn't have enough insurance for me to play with the neighbor kids. And the turtles are durable.
He never actually mentioned that he wanted to be a comedian, but I remember he had these Jonathan Winter records, but he thought he was really hysterical, and he would play these old records for me. The fact that he was kind of really exploring the different aspects of comedy, maybe that enabled him to want to become a comedian.
Tortuga, the Tortuga. Muy pequeño Tortuga.
Our family grew up on a lot of comedy. I remember Monty Python being part of what we grew up on. Every Sunday, he'd sleep so late, and we didn't know what was going on until we figured out he was sitting up watching Saturday Night Live, back when it was John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, that whole crew. I mean, he was just loved to sit up and watch that kind of stuff. And
at night, sometimes on Saturday, I would watch TV. I saw Saturday Night Live. I saw Chevy Chase and John Belushi. I saw Gilda Radner. I liked Saturday Night Live. It was nearby where I lived in New Jersey. They filmed it in New York City. Sometimes people ask me, what comedians do I most admire? Which comedians have I seen, that influenced me? And I say, fat guy in a little coat. Fat guy in a little coat. Fat guy in a little coat. I grew up watching Sesame Street. You probably grew up watching Sesame Street. Now we're going to sing a song, goddammit!
At Arlington Senior High School, I played football. I wasn't socially acceptable enough to be on the A team. The coach huddled with the A team for a special play where the entire A team's offensive line held me down on the ground while their biggest man twisted my foot until it made a cracking sound, and I lay there screaming. They split the cartilage in my right foot. The coach assigned 2 black men to help me off the field. Maybe that was an insult, and left me in the locker room until my mom could drive me to the hospital. At the end of the season, there was a ceremony where the school awarded me my sports letter, a Scarlet A. I was still in a full leg cast, so I had to hobble with crutches to the center stage for my award. In 1981, in what would have been my senior year at high school, my parents enrolled me in Wyoming Seminary in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. The prep school's mascot was the Blue Knight, and I hoped that they would help me become a West Point Black Knight. My parents paid for 2 years up front, and I was kicked out after being there for only 4 months. It was a Protestant school. Maybe they didn't like me because I was Catholic. I went once to a party in the woods near campus. Later that night, some kid who didn't like me held a rock in his hand and then smashed it against my head. There I was, all cut open and bleeding. Then I fell down a snowy slope and into a drainage ditch. Ultimately, I was taken to a hospital to be treated for hypothermia. The police wrote me a ticket for public drunkenness. I often wonder if they cut my brain open and gave me a lobotomy because they wanted me to stop thinking. I don't know. I think people thought I was too hyper. So on one occasion, there was kind of this dominant alpha male gym teacher, and he seemed angry at me and seemed to arbitrarily tell me to stand at this particular place in the gymnasium. And so I complied as he said, and I stood there for a while, and it felt very awkward. And I stepped away from like where he told me to stand, and just then this big high pressure sodium lamp fell from the ceiling and smashed into the ground where he had been telling me to precisely stand. And I don't know, like maybe if they wanted it to drop on me, they would have done that. Maybe they wanted to demonstrate to me that they could injure me or crush me if they felt like it. Okay, everybody at the school was saying like, oh, somebody committed suicide at our school. It must have been Fred. I think they were kind of coming to me and say like, why didn't you commit suicide? I think that he looked at me and my situation, and ultimately before he killed himself, he came to a realization about I was something like a lab rat in an elaborate maze, and that he felt like he might have been like some kind of scientist toying with this lab rat, and that all the possible outcomes that I hoped for, like success and advancement, he knew from his position that my goals would be unattainable. The school, I think, had the position that I was insane. I think the school feared that I might be another suicide and I'd be an insurance liability, or I'd get killed by another student and maybe my parents would sue the school. They kicked me out and didn't give my parents their money back. They put a big picture of John in the yearbook, and there's no picture of me. I was kicked out of prep school, and I went back to Vestal, New York. I went back to the Vestal Senior High, the same town where I went to middle school for a while. I got an associate's degree in arts and science in 1986. I asked Broome Community College to let me teach courses in English as a second language. They wouldn't allow that, although they did employ some guy down the street named Nathan who had gotten his girlfriend pregnant. Apparently Nathan got the job although he had no college degree. The local story was that Nathan had used a sandwich bag as a condom and that it didn't work, and that's how he got his girlfriend pregnant. I guess we were teasing him specifically, saying that maybe it was like there were these alligator bags they used to make, like maybe he wore one of those, for her pleasure.